Welcome again to the show. And what we have on the menu is reincarnation. And I haven't got a clue why it raised its head this week, but it just did. And without analyzing too much, I thought, well, let's run with this one and see where it leads. My first introduction to the concept of reincarnation was about 5 or 6 years ago when I was 17. And at that time, I was reading a series of books by the Tibetan author called Lobsang Rampa. And there were fascinating fictional, kind of factual as well, discourses around Tibetan Buddhism. And to a 17-year-old with a brain that was asking itself too many questions, I just loved these books, and a couple of my friends did as well. And we read the whole series. And from what I can remember from those years is that I learned about the importance of meditation, and I've carried that thought with me to the present moment. I learned about the concept of the third eye, and that's definitely something that I talk about and feel is important. I learned about astral traveling, which is a huge subject on its own, and definitely I've carried that interest with me. And the other thing was reincarnation, and to be quite honest, I don't think I've hardly thought about that since I read those books so many years ago. So as usual, just before one does an interview, one dives into the favorite source of reference, which is Wikipedia. And I know there's lots of things on there that aren't terribly accurate and all the rest of it, but I can tell you it's the go-to place for most journalists and presenters. So there's a fair amount about reincarnation on Wikipedia. And the thing that I guess surprised me is how many philosophies and religions and faith-based belief systems are based around the concept of when we die, it doesn't end there. Well, I hope they're all right, because I'll definitely have a drink to that. And I guess most people would, because people don't generally choose to die. There's stuff around on this planet they still want to do, and there's loved ones that they still want to be around. And there are and just breaking things into two very rough subtopics. There are the true reincarnation, as far as the Tibetans and the Buddhists are concerned, is that one dies and is reborn in another body to live another life. And this cycle of new lives goes on forever, or until one reaches the state of mind of nirvana, which is where you are literally at one with the universe. And as far as I know, very few people reach that. So in that case, we have many lives in front of us. And during our lives, we accrue points on our karma. And if we do good to others, then that's a tick in the right box for us and shows us that we're developing into something resembling a compassionate human being. And if we do ill on others, or even, I guess, even thinking of doing ill on others, then that's a strike against us. And if we get too many crosses for our bad karma, then it means that our next life may well be a lot less comfortable, in the hope that one way or the other, we might learn the easy way. Now, I haven't got a clue, obviously, about whether there's an ounce of truth in any of that, but it's an appealing philosophy. And certainly, there are many, many people who've gone before me, eminent, far more eloquent people than me, including people like Carl Jung, and who said, you know, we're all on a journey, and it's a destination of learnings and mistakes, and learning from mistakes, and eventually reaching some degree of philosophical and religious, call it what you will, comfort within our own skin. So that's reincarnation, and many people believe in this literally. Some people believe in it metaphorically, but it's certainly, there's a lot of body of support behind it. And the other kind of model that people use is that we live on this mortal world, and when we die, we don't come back. And we go to a place which is called heaven or hell. I don't think many people literally believe in hell anymore. They probably live in enough hell during their life, depending on where they're born and the times they go through. And I suppose we'd all like to believe in heaven, and that's why it's very popular with some religions. And of course, whenever we talk about religions or faith-based belief systems, usually sooner or later there's dogmas, there's all kinds of rules that we have to follow, and if we don't do the right processes in the same order, then the whole thing doesn't work. And even within the same religion, I mean, I'm not qualified to speak on any of them really, but the nearest is that I was brought up with the Church of England, the Christian religion. So at school, I would read bits from the Bible and we'd have lessons on this subject. And I still remember the stories because if nothing else, there's some great stories in the Bible. But even in the religion that I know about, there are so many different sects. It's like the branches of a tree. Different variations of Christianity prosper and thrive and then fade away. And you can get the ridiculous situation where two people can share the same religion in theory, and yet they hate each other and prepare to kill each other for their version of whatever the truth is. And I suppose that's one of the main things that drove me in the opposite direction from that kind of thinking. So I just wonder in the webinar like this, why was it that reincarnation came into my head as a subject to have as the opening topic and hopefully to stimulate a bit of debate? And a couple of days ago, it just came to me that there might be a really good question to ask people, and a question that I ask myself all the time. And it's definitely a question that one way or another, probably don't present it in just this kind of way, but I would ask my clients as well. And the question is this: if you believed in heaven, or whatever that model of heaven might be, or if you believed in reincarnation, that you would be able to come back to this planet in a different body, would it change the way you live right now, or for the next 24 hours, or indeed for the next 25 years? Would it change the way you live? And the thought that took me from that question, that statement, was the Formula One racing driver that we've talked about a few times before, Fernando Alonso, who has a tattoo on his back, which is apparently a Zen symbol or a samurai symbol. And roughly translated, it means I will live my life as if I'm already dead. Now, I can believe that's a samurai symbol, because the little I know about the samurais is that when they were taught to be fighters, they were taught that if they were fighting to protect their own skin, they would not fight with the necessary speed and skill that we required of them. So this thought of a fight as if you're already dead, or drive your car as if you're already dead, whilst pretty uncomfortable when one looks at it from an analytical point of view, it does clear some headspace. Because if you're going around a corner at 200 miles an hour in a car, I don't think you really have much attention left to think things like, well, what if I don't come out of this corner, if I get my angles wrong? So it gets in the way of peak performance, for better or for worse. So that's why reincarnation was first on the menu tonight. And I've given you a few little tidbits of that, as well as mentioning in passing the third eye, astral traveling, and once again, meditation. So now I welcome comments, and Greg isn't here to kick things off, so somebody else will have to be brave and ask what to them, or say something what to them will sound incredibly stupid, but it won't sound stupid to me or anybody else that's listening or watching this. Floor open. Johnny.
Yes, I think it's interesting what you said about karma and doing good things. I think a lot of that as well, though, is based on maybe an element of upbringing. And I think in one of your shows earlier, you said, you know, between the early ages of 0 and 10, a lot of stuff is hardwired. So I think if you're brought up in a and you're fortunate enough to be in an abundant situation where you're seeing people do good things, gratitude, helping others, then that becomes very much part of your DNA, your neurological mapping, so that it's part of your persona to go the extra mile to help people. And I think also then with adversities that you face in life, you know, you can either turn them into resentment or into wisdom. So you either help people or you become resentful. So I think part of that is also, I think, also intertwined with when you've spoken about the ego. And I think when you let the ego aside, you're more likely to do good things to help others. Then when bad things happen, it might stop you from helping others because you're consumed by your own life. And I think, you know, I think if the world, you know, acted more about helping others, I think it'd be a better world. And I think, you know, that sort of positive energy would transmit to more people.
Well, it would, Johnny, and thanks for saying that. I mean, I went for a walk this afternoon in the rain just to clear my head a little bit, and I was having the same kind of thoughts, because one of the like depressing thoughts I have, and when you become a philosopher or start thinking and studying philosophy, it is pretty depressing, because we've been around this planet, as far as our records go, about, well, the records probably go to 15,000 years or 30,000 years perhaps, but not much older than that. And of course, in evolutionary terms, as we were developing our brains and everything else, much, much longer. But the known history is one of repeated warfare. And it's been like this all through the ages. And a lot of this warfare has been based on religions and not liking other people's religions. And so it would be a very simple thing to say, well, if we didn't have religion, there wouldn't be any wars. But I have a very uncomfortable feeling that it wouldn't make any difference. We'd find some other reason to go to war. We would want their land, we'd want their cows, we'd want something for nothing. And so we'd get enough people together so that we could get what we wanted. And so what you know, where's the hope? If we were all more caring and sharing, would that make the world a different place? Well, I'm sure that many people will call me naive, and maybe you, Johnny, but to me, I'm definitely in your camp. I think that if there were more of us who could think a little bit like that, I mean, none of us are going to be perfect by a long way, but at least if we could think along those ways, there would be some energy, positive energy that would build up and I'd say infect other people. By infect, I mean in the nicest possible way. So I don't give up, and if I'm assuming that this is the only life I've got, so I've made plenty of mistakes in the past, at least I want to, you know, as I get a little bit older, hopefully I'll be a little bit wiser, and that's definitely the direction I'd like to go, as would you. And the other hope I have, I guess, is, again, following on from one of your comments, Johnny, you were talking about, you know, if one is fortunate to be born into a loving family and a comfortable environment and free from war and starvation and disease and all that kind of stuff, then that's going to make it a lot easier, hopefully, for a person to grow up with a more appreciative mindset. So what about the many people, perhaps the majority of people, who aren't? I mean, right now we've got wars going on all over this planet, and kids are being born all the time, and they're living through this stuff. They don't know what a normal life is by our comfortable standards. And I have a little direct experience of this, because for most of my life, I worked overseas in places that would be described euphemistically as challenging. So I was exposed to a lot of poverty at first hand and what poverty does. In Nigeria, for example, and particularly in Angola, because Angola was going through what you know, might be one of the longest wars. It certainly went on for a long, long time, and there were a lot of what are called internally displaced people, or refugees, I guess you would say. And there were an awful lot of street kids. These were kids who literally had no family. Their parents had been killed or somehow disappeared, and they were left to fend for themselves. You can't imagine anything much more terrifying for a child than that. And yet, the ones that at least I met or had some contact with, they had something inside them, some resilience, and hard to believe, but even pleasure. their faces were never too far away from a smile. And they were literally, diving inside garbage trucks and stuff like this, trying to find any kind of rotting food that they could eat. And I guess they lived in the moment because they didn't know anything else. If they looked too far ahead, it would have been a pretty gloomy thing that was facing them, unfortunately. But they were getting something. There was some spark of humanity there, and who knows where it came from. And another story there is, as expatriates, we all tried to help these kids the best way we could. And I remember one couple, an American couple, who actually wanted to adopt one of these street kids. Now, adopting any kind of kid in any kind of country is fraught with difficulty and paperwork, and there has to be administrative controls. They were going through all of these hoops, and they were almost ready, actually, for the child to return to the States with them when the kid left. He was a lovely kid, by the way, a beautiful, intelligent child, but he didn't want to go. Given a choice between going to the States with this loving couple and going back to living on the street won. Now, explain that to me. I can't explain it. Yeah, I think we have to spread the love around. I mean, I've spoken perhaps too long about that, Johnny, but that's all we can do, isn't it? Okay, I don't have any more comments. I'd love to. I mean, I can talk a little bit more about maybe another subject that I mentioned earlier on, or we'll stay with this one. Yeah, is that Angela?
I was going to say, it is, yeah.
Oh, Angela.
Hi. Yeah, just thinking about your reasoning and wondering why. Is it familiarity, perhaps? The familiarity of the surroundings and what somebody knows, and therefore finds it difficult to make that leap of faith.
What do you think?
Well, that could be an answer for some situations with some people, yeah. But it's only one answer or one possibility. So, yeah. But like you say, wondering why that child didn't go with the loving family and have a new life, new opportunities.
Yeah, I think you might be right.
Mm.
I mean, none of us can really put ourselves in the position of that kid, but we can certainly put ourselves in the position of, I guess, of staying in the life that we understand and are familiar with, rather than taking a chance to what might be a better life. And it is true that we do get, used to things, and we can get used to comfort, and also we can get used to discomfort. Now, it always amazes me when we have really, really hot weather. You can walk around and you'll see some people, if you could just mute your mic a moment, Angela, because we've got some flicker here. It always amuses me in extreme weather, like when it's really, really hot, and it doesn't matter whatever country you're in, you can go out and see people wearing gloves and thick coats and scarves and thick boots and all the rest of it. And equally so, it's the same in the cold. Very, very cold weathers, and you'll find people wearing by choice, wearing very few clothes at all. And I've been in some of the hottest places in the world and some of the coldest. And the coldest country I ever worked in was Kazakhstan. In the winter, on a relatively mild day, it would be minus 20 centigrade, and it would get up to occasionally up to minus 50 centigrade. And I guess I made a kind of a stupid sort of commitment to myself. And I said I was going to have my evening jog, whatever the weather. And it got pretty hot in the summer as well, and I did. But I got very early, even when my run was only 30 minutes, I got early frostbite on a few occasions. And when I got back to my cabin, there was no time to get undressed. I just went straight into the shower. I mean, I even came in once and there was ice all over my face and all over my shoulder where I'd been breathing. But I was able to run in those conditions. So we definitely, definitely, it's good to do things a little uncomfortable sometimes, but I don't recommend running in minus 40 degrees centigrade to anybody unless they're crazy. That I particularly don't recommend that. So yeah, that kid, well, he was only 8 or 9 years old. There wasn't a lot of cerebral processing going on there. He was just, you know, as any kid of that age would be. He had his friends. And who knows what happened to him now. I'd love to think it's a happy ending. It could be. Angola's a rich country now, from what I hear.
Sorry, I've got another thing to say there, Steve. You mentioned karma. Don't you think that this pandemic was a great example for people to see how they would react in a fight or flight situation, and also see whether they went the extra mile for people? But being a society that's engulfed with things like Instagram, Facebook, hasn't it fueled the ego more for people, and that they've become so self-conscious that having time for others is of less importance?
Well, that's an interesting question and comment, and obviously something that we've all thought about. This pandemic has probably been the greatest test for this present generation, because other than the ones that have been affected by war and Ebola and diseases like that, I guess actually that's probably half the world. Those who haven't been in those kind of stressful situations, it probably, for the rest, it's been the most stressful thing they've done. And it goes against their reptile brain, you know, their primitive evolution. We are a social animal. And to have lockdown imposed on people, where people are not allowed to go outside, not allowed to touch people, sometimes in their own family, is a huge, huge stress. And we are weeks into this pandemic now, several months. And in fact, Johnny, as we were talking before the show, you know, you've had a pretty busy week with people suffering from severe stress and things like that. And I guess I have as well in certain ways. And I don't have the statistics to show that there's more stress now than there was, but we do have organizations who measure this kind of stuff. And the statistics that I've been following, reading, they're saying that, well, the rates of domestic violence are going up hugely, which is not surprising if you've got families locked down. I suppose it's highlighting a problem that was already there, but lots of other forms of stress as well. So yeah, this has been a wake-up call for us, and it's made us think about stuff, whether for good or ill, who knows. And it's also made us think on an extra dimension, I think, because apart from the personal circumstances that the pandemic has affected all of us, our financial security, our jobs, our family relationships, everything, there's the bigger picture of what's happening to the planet. And as far as the planet's concerned, who doesn't understand pandemics and people living and dying, as far as the universal planet's concerned, we've already seen, you know, a recovery in the ecology of the world. We're seeing animals changing their behaviors. We're seeing, you know, more fertility amongst animal species, possibly because of less pollution. But the people who study these things have been publishing these papers. So from that point of view, taking the people out of the equation, it shows the resilience of the planet. I mean, we're told, you know, that we're doomed and the planet's only going to survive a few more hundreds of years or a few thousand years, or some people say even less. But even in a matter of a few months, some of the things we measure, like air quality and pollution and stuff like that, and how animals breathe, all of that's turned positive. I'm not sure whether that's anyway answered your question, Johnny. Yeah, he's giving a thumbs up there.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay, you're welcome. Do we have any other comments or questions? No? Well, I'll plant something in your head and then we'll close out. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for supporting these Thursdays. And apart from the reincarnation at the beginning of the show, I mentioned 3 other things that excited me at the age of 17 from these books by Lobsang Rampa. And of course, I forgot to mention the most important thing about him. There's no such person as Lobsang Rampa, even though I think millions of books were sold. He's got a very English name. I don't know what it is. Let's call him John Smith. And I think from memory, he was an electrician, and he might have come from Coventry, I'm guessing that bit. And as far as I know, he has no known connection to Zen Buddhism or any of these topics, but he wrote a good book, and it just goes to show that he had an influence on me, which in some ways changed my life. So sometimes it's not who you are and what you think, it's what you communicate, and whether you can find a way of communicating that resonates with other people. And the other things that I learned from him, I learned about, that's what made me think about reincarnation, and just in order, also meditation, third eye, and astral traveling. And those might be things that we talk about on another show, who knows? We'll see. Because we live in the moment. We don't know what we're going to be doing tomorrow, let alone next Thursday. We know that some good stuff is likely to turn up. We know that we might not even recognize some of that good stuff if we're too obsessed in other things. And we know for sure that we're also going to be tested. And that's the times when we have to remind ourselves we evolved as resilient human beings, and we can take a lot more than we think we can. It's only when we go out in -50 centigrade that we find that out. Okay, keep yourselves warm, folks. Autumn is approaching in this hemisphere, and God's willing, we will meet again next week.